Hi, friends. All right, I can't believe it, but we actually are only 4 chapters away from finishing Chains. So we're going to read 42 and 43 today, and then next week we'll just have the last 2 chapters before the next book continues the story. So let's get started. Chapter 42 is the Declaration of Independence of the United States of America. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Dr. Destouge visited Lady Seymour each morning and eve. She could nod her head yes and shake it no to his questions. Yes, she knew who she was. No, she had no sensation in her feet, nor her hands. She could barely chew milk-soaked bread and sip broth. Her mind had not gone soft, though. Her eyes blazed bright in her skull and followed me as I moved around the room. And when the doctor and Madame talked, she listened in right close. Plainly said, she was as much a prisoner in her broken body as Curzon was in his cell. Try to move this. Madame Seamstress came near as frequent as the doctor. The birthday ball gown had a scarlet red and underskirt topped with a short gown of royal blue, navy blue, embroidered with gold. The hairdresser and Madame spent hours consulting prints of fashionable ladies in Paris so that they could design a suitable hairstyle. I was not privy to the details, but I heard Madame talking about jewels made of paste that would sit in her curls. She also wanted a small British flag to fly atop her locks, but the hairdresser talked her out of it. Hannah and Mary talked about the ball every waking minute. I'm sure even the Queen herself would have grown tired of hearing about it. At noon, the guns at the battery, which the British had taken to calling Fort George, would fire a royal salute. An hour later, the warships in the harbor would blast a response. At 6 o'clock, the guests would arrive at the ball with trumpets playing and drums beating a welcome. The dancing would last until midnight, when the fireworks would explode over the harbor. After that, the banquet would begin. There is no way under heaven that Madame would survive 6 hours of dancing without having something to eat. I finished reading Common Sense the night before the ball. The bookseller was right. The words were dangerous, every one of them. I ought throw it in the fire, but could not bring myself to do it. Mr. Paine knew how to stir up the pot. He went right after the king and attacked the crown on his head. I laid down one long road of a sentence in my memory. For all men being originally equals, no one by birth could have a right to set up his own family in perpetual preference to all others forever. Way I saw it, Mr. Paine was saying all people were the same, that no one deserved a crown or was born to be higher than another. That's why America could make its own freedom. 'Twas a wonder the book did not explode into flames in my hands. I buried it back in its hidey hole and laid myself down to sleep. My eyes would not close. My thoughts were churned up like muddy water with dangerous eels thrashing through it. If an entire nation could seek its freedom, why not a girl? And if a girl was to seek her freedom, how could she do such a fool-headed thing? Especially a girl trapped in New York. Best thing would be to break into the desk of a British commander, steal a pass and forge her name and his name on it and act free. And pigs were likely to fly too. Plus, that girl seeking freedom would have to walk. She could walk the mile from Wall Street to the north edge of the city, but then she'd run into the guards stationed there. She'd have to sneak past them and not get shot. Then she'd have 11 miles of running to the north edge of the island. If she took the Greenwich Road or the Post Road, she'd likely be captured by one in need of a slave or in need of the reward paid for a healthy runaway. If she stuck to the woods that ran up the center of the island, she could be ate by a bear or drowned in a swamp. If angels guided her safe through the woods and she made the north edge, she'd have to get past the guards watching over King's Bridge, where New York Island touched the rest of America. I rolled over, my back to the fire. That girl could more likely grab hold of the feet of a passing crow and bid him fly her to safety. Better yet, sprout her own wings. The only path left was across the water. A girl like that could not swim and did not own a boat, not to mention the river currents were fast and the crossing would be noted by someone who would raise a ruckus. And then the soldiers would line up like a firing squad and shoot that girl dead in the water. They wouldn't even bury her proper, just let the water take the boat and the body, and both would be consumed by sea monsters. I fell asleep cursing them that planted the city of New York on an island. My dawn visits up the commons had become the most ordinary of errands. Madame never woke early enough to know my absence, and the soldier wives were so grateful to avoid the chore they never told. Curzon had grown terrible thin and was still feverish, but his leg had healed up, and he greeted me at the window every day. After I left the prison, I'd fetch the water and head back to Wall Street, passing by the Golden Hill Tavern in case Captain Morse needed me, which he never, ever did. So when the captain signaled for me from the tavern porch the next morning, I was surprised. I had not seen him for weeks, not since the news of the rebel victory at Trenton. Good day, Just Sal, he said with a sleepy smile. How do you fare? Good enough, sir, I said. Is something amiss? He winced and pulled his coat tighter. Nothing grave, no news of battle or a prisoner exchange. I waited while he sought the words. I'm in need of a favor, he finally said. If it's no worldly import, but it's of no worldly import, but it is a matter of honor for me. Sir, I must repay a debt, Just Sal. I wagered Captain William Farrar that the British would not dare hold this ridiculous birthday celebration. It's a slap in the face to the people who are starving. Yes, sir. He frowned and kicked at a stone poking up from the half-frozen mud. But I'm proven wrong, aren't I? Thousands of pounds are being wasted, and so I owe my friend, Captain Farrar, a penny. A gentleman always pays his debts promptly, be they large or small. I was confuddled. And you want that I should... He threw up his hands in frustration. The British have confined all American officers to their lodging houses today. Why? They fear we might mount an insurrection while they are dancing minuets and gorging on stuffed goose. They have a point. The ball would provide the perfect cover for a surprise attack if Washington were nearby. So I am prevented from making good on my bet to William, and he is prevented from coming round to collect his due. 'Tis a small matter of honor, to be sure, but when in reduced circumstances, these things take on a greater weight, don't you think? Still confuddled, I nodded my head. Yes, sir. Good, then you'll do it. Do what? Take the penny to William with my salutations. It will give him a good laugh. He lives on Chapel Street, a house with red shutters on the corner of Warren. Say you'll do it for me, Just Sal, and the next penny I earn goes into your pocket, upon my word. Madame would be wig deep in preparations for the ball all day. The soldier wives would too, for they belonged to the army of servants who would work at the birthday dinner. Lady Seymour required only a warm fire and occasional help with the teacup. A walk up to the Warren Street on a sunny day such as this would be most welcome. Happy to help, Captain, I said. The roar of cannon shook the kitchen just after midday and made me near jump out of my skin. I dropped the turnip I was peeling and it rolled across the floor. What was that? I asked, clutching the table. Are we under attack? Hannah laughed and used the poker to push the logs to the back of the hearth. No, you goose, that's the royal salute for Her Majesty. Mary pressed the hot iron against the apron on the table. Do you figure they might need us early? The major said 5 o'clock, Hannah said. Give us time to finish up here. Will you get to see the dancing? I asked. Nah, Mary said. They'll be too busy running us ragged, setting up the dinner, but they've promised to feed us good. She picked up the apron and studied it for wrinkles. I wish my mother could see this, me serving at a queen's birthday ball. Too bad your mother is on the other side of the globe with Her Majesty, Hannah said. They'll both be tragical late to the party, Mary giggled. Madame sent a note to her friend Jane Drinkwater, who agreed to bring her collection of necklaces and the latest gossip to tea. The news caused Madame to send the soldier wives pawing through the attic for a gown she had not worn yet this year. Hannah sent me to fetch more water, which I did with great pleasure and a short detour. The houses on Warren Street were a mix. Some were modest, 2 or 3 were rather grand, with arches over the windows and fancy boot scrapers by the front door. The trees and fences in the neighborhood had all been cut down for firewood. It made the corner of Warren and Chapel look underdressed. I went round the back of the house with the red shutters, knocked on the door, and explained my errand to a maid, who fetched Captain Farrar for me, a horse-faced man with an easy laugh. Good Captain Morse is indeed a gentleman, he said as I presented him with the coin. And you're the girl who carries messages to his men in Bridewell? Yes, sir. My lads are locked up in the old sugar house, he said, his smile fading. The one's still alive. He stood there caught up in silence and his own thoughts. I tried to think of a polite way to take my leave, but could not find the proper words. The breeze came from the south and carried a salt tang with it. Although snow lay about and everyone was wrapped deep in their clothing, the appearance of the clouds made a body know deep down that spring was stirring. Yes, sir, I finally said, begging pardon, but I must be on my way. Of course, he said, his sighs still distant. I walked down the path to Warren Street and stopped when I heard him call me. Sal, wait there a moment. I stood a while longer, watching the clouds and scolding myself for mixing in with the affairs of gentlemen in their honor. Several carriages containing bundled up ladies and serious looking officers passed along a street, pulled by shaggy coated horses. Most folks took no more notice of me than they would a cartman selling oysters or a vagabond from Canvastown. Just as I set my mind to leave, Captain Farrar came back out. Give this to Morse, please, he said as he handed me the note. He'll know what to do. I studied the folded paper and made bold. Another wager, sir? Another carriage passed on the street, the horses clip-clopping slow. He shook his head, the laughter gone from his eyes. No, news from headquarters. Don't tarry with it. He touched his fingertips to the brim of his cap. I bobbed a curtsy and took my leave, hurrying toward the tea-water pump. I should have known I'd be pressed into more message carrying. These soldier types were forever scheming up one thing or another, and it put a girl like me in a rough spot. Not that they ever thought about that. I didn't ask to ferry messages across the city for some captain I didn't know. How was that connected to my deal with Dibdin to treat Curzon proper? It wasn't, not one bit. The good captains Morris and Farrar would just have to wait till it suited me for this last message to be delivered. If I didn't get back soon, I'd be in for it. I pushed through the back door to the locked-in kitchen, still fussing about selfish captains who only thought of their own skins. When Curzon got out, he'd have a debt of honor the size of a whale to me. I'd make that boy. I set down the water buckets, removed my cloak, and hung it from a peg near the fire. I stood rubbing my hands together and warming them over the flames. As soon as I could move them, I'd boil up the water. The door from the front hall slammed open. There you are. The words came at me like shards of glass. I turned. 'Twas Madame Lockton holding a small riding crop in her hand. Ma'am? She crossed the room and slashed the crop across my face. It hurt fierce, but I knew not to cry out. How dare you, she spat. Chapter 43, this is from Colonel Joseph Reed in a letter to General George Washington. That even a failure cannot be more fatal than to remain in our present situation. In short, some enterprise must be undertaken in our present circumstances, or we must give up the cause. Our affairs are hastening fast to ruin if we do not retrieve them by some happy event. Delay with us is now equal to a total defeat. Please, ma'am, I started. Silence, she cracked the crop across my shoulder. The back door opened and Hannah entered. Oh, excuse me, she said, turning to leave again. Stay, Madame ordered. Hannah let the door close and murmured, Yes, Madame, her eyes stealing once to me and then quickly away. I fought the urge to run for the knife drawer. Madame paced in front of me. I have never in my entire life been so humiliated. She paused and put on a mimic face. I saw your little black girl talking to a rebel officer on Warren Street. Do you allow your slaves to consort with the enemy? I could not swallow nor breathe. She brought the crop down with a crack on the edge of the table. Jane Drinkwater said this to me. Jane Drinkwater, the biggest gossip in New York. Madame paced again, her hair flying loose, her manner quite unsteady. I said, Jane, no, Jane, you must be mistaken, not our Sal. Colonel Hawkins himself uses her for errands. She stopped suddenly, and Jane says, No, Anne, your girl was speaking to a rebel prisoner on Warren Street. It's hard to miss the mark on her face. From my carriage, I saw her take a note from his hand. I opened my mouth to protest, but she slashed at me again. This time, the blow opened a cut on my forehead. Give me that note, Madame demanded. I have no note, ma'am, I said quiet. She held out her hand. Liar, give me that paper or I'll turn you over to the British commander so fast your fool head will spin. Her voice shook with rage. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the folded note. Madame looked over to Hannah. See, you just need to be firm with them. Hannah said nothing. A drop of blood rolled down the side of my face. I clutched the note in my fist. Give it, Madame narrowed her eyes. Did you hear me, girl? Everybody carried a little evil in them, Mama once told me. Madame Lockton had more than her share. The poison had eaten holes through her soul and made room for vermin to nest inside her. Girl, Madame stamped her foot on the floor. The evil inside of me woke and crackled like lightning. I could wrap my hands around her throat. I could brain her with a poker, thrust her face into the flames. I could beat her senseless with my fists. I shook from the effort of holding myself still, clutching the crumpled paper. Mama said we had to fight the evil inside of us by overcoming it with goodness. She said it was a hard thing to do, but it made us worthy. I breathed deep to steady myself. I threw the captain's note into the fire. Hannah gasped. Madame shrieked and pushed me out of the way, but the paper was already alight. She dropped the crop and smacked me again in the face with her hand, as she had the day I first landed in New York. You foul, bloody wench! She reached behind her, picked up a bowl and hurled it at me. I ducked, and it crashed against the hearth. I will sell you, she screamed. I will auction you at dawn on Monday. I'll sell your demon sister, too, to the most cruel, heartless master I can find. The devil himself, if he wants. She paused to catch her breath. Ruth? Hannah stepped forward. I do believe there was a knock at the front door, Madame, she said. But she had already sold Ruth. Madame glared at her. Then answer it, you bloody fool. Didn't she? As Hannah left, Madame brushed back her hair, gathering her dignity. I still stood by the fire, where the note had burned to fine ash. I could not think what might happen next. Madame tugged at her short gown. What's that stupid look on your face? She said with a harsh laugh. You didn't know I still owned her, did you? Ruth? The name escaped my mouth. Brat, Madame spat. Couldn't find a buyer. Had to ship her down to Charleston. I shall tell the estate manager to get rid of her. Toss her in the swamp. Her death will be on your head, you insolent fool. Hannah came back in from the hall. The hairdresser, Madame. What? Madame wheeled around. What did you say? The hairdresser has come to prepare you for the ball. The Queen's ball, ma'am. You must leave in a few hours. Madame cleared her throat and stood straighter. Of course, you must first help me into my gown. Hannah nodded. Yes, ma'am. Lock the girl in the potato bin, then come upstairs. The bin was more than half filled with potatoes and smelled of damp earth and worms. There was not enough room to sit up, but lying down was like lying in a bed of rocks. I wanted to scream and pinch myself hard to fight the urge. I did not want to give Madame any satisfaction. Overhead came the noises of footsteps as the hairdresser performed his job and left. The colonel returned from headquarters to change into his dress uniform, and Madame sent Hannah running for this folderol and that. There was a sound of horse hooves and the roll of carriage wheels, and the front door opened and then closed, and the house fell quiet save for Hannah's steps in the kitchen. A light appeared through the boards of the bin. It's me, Hannah said. She's gone. The light was set on the ground. Then there was a fumbling of a key in the padlock. The bin door opened and Hannah peered inside. I brought you some things. Here. She handed me a chamber pot, a blanket, and a mug of water. 'Tain't right to lock you away with nothing. You ain't an animal. Let me go, please, I pleaded. But before I could say anything further or reach for her, she had slammed down the door and shot home the lock again. I'll be back by dawn and check on you then, she said. Try to sleep. Please, Hannah, I cried. Please, I beg of you. Her footsteps flew up the stairs and the door slammed. I thought I heard a sob, but perhaps I didn't. The bees overtook me then. As evening moved into night, they ate through me and hived up inside my brain pan with a loud buzz, their wings beating me into submission. Someone whimpered and cried, and it must have been me, but it mattered not, for I was already dead. It was only a few days, hours perhaps, until my heart would stop beating in truth, and the bees would fly off to haunt someone else. And then came the sound of a distant roar, like a lion just sprung from a trap. The bees paused, and I froze, waiting. No one was home except for Lady Seymour, and she was not capable of making noise. The roar came again. I cocked my head and listened. It did not come from the street nor the house above. It was not cannon fire. 'Twas inside me, a thought, thunderous loud. Ruth was alive in Charleston, in South Carolina, not on a ship, not on an island, alive in a town I can walk to. My toes wiggled in my sturdy black shoes and my legs itched. I lay flat as I could on the bumpy mound of potatoes and kicked once at the boards of the bin. My heavy shoes made a terrible loud noise on the wood. I stopped, counting to 100. There came no sound from overhead, no commotion out on the street. I kicked again at the same spot. The potatoes under me shifted and the mug of water overturned. I kicked a third time. The boards did not move at all. I cursed the carpenter who had built this tomb. There has to be a way out. I kicked, stomped, slammed. I raged and screamed and fought. Nothing happened. I stopped, wiped the sweat from my face, and closed my eyes. Think. The bin stood a little taller than Ruth and was as long in both directions as it was tall. I reached up to touch the boards above my head. They were rough hewn, put together with cold nails. My fingertips traced the length of each board, feeling along the splinters and the knots in the wood. The top was as solid as a brick wall, each nail fastened tight. I fought back the panic that rose in my throat and tested the strength of each board that ran from the top down the sides. All strong, all sound. Think, remember. When Ruth and I slept down here, the far corner of the cellar went muddy in a heavy rain. Maybe the damp had eaten at the boards. I moved over to that corner of the bin and scooped the potatoes out of the way, heaping them behind me. I sat back and put my feet on each board it turned and pushed. The third board I tried gave way a little. So did the next two. I moved the potato heap so I could best lean against it and push with my legs. I kicked. There was a quiet crack. I kicked again and leaned forward to feel the boards. The one had a piece chipped off where the wood was rotted through. The other had a long splint in it. I leaned back and took a deep breath, then kicked and kicked with all my strength until the wood broke and flew into the dark. I took the stairs two at a time and paused before I entered the kitchen. The house was still silent. I hurried down the hall, past the grandfather clock, and up the stairs to the drawing room. I needed a map and had a mind to steal a pass too, if I could. I threw some wood on the fire, lit a candle from the flames, and carried it to the long dining table covered with maps and countless papers. I lit the rest of the candles on the table as if preparing for a feast, then searched through the papers, throwing those that were useless to me to the floor. Finally, I found a small map that showed the colonies from Massachusetts down to Georgia. The distance from Rhode Island to New York was the same as the tip of my little finger to the first knuckle under it. From New York to Charleston stretched all the way down my fingers to the palm. The crackling firewood startled me. I glanced up. There was a movement over the hearth, and for an instant, my heart caught in my throat. A ghost? The firelight brightened. No, not a ghost. I had caught sight of myself in the large mirror that hung over the mantel. I could scarce recognize me. My hands fumbled for a candle. I moved to the mirror, guarding the flame, and lit the oil lamps that were set into the wall. The mirror caught the light and reflected it back at me. I leaned in. In truth, it seemed I was looking at a stranger who lived beyond the glass. My face was thinner than I remembered and longer from brow to chin. My nose and mouth recollected Mama's, but the set of the eyes, those came from Papa. As I stared, their two faces came forth and drifted back until I could see only me. I turned my head to the side a bit and studied the brand on my face for the first time, studied it hard, the capital I that proclaimed my insolent manners and crimes. I leaned closer to the mirror. The letter was a pink ribbon embroidered on my skin. I touched it, smooth and warm, flesh made into silk. The scars on Papa's cheek had been 3 lines across his cheek carved with a sharp blade. He was proud of his marks. In the country of his ancestors, they made him into a man. I traced the I with my fingertip. This is my country mark. I did not ask for it, but I would carry it as Papa carried his. It made me his daughter. It made me strong. I took a step back, seeing near my whole self in the mirror. I pushed back my shoulders and raised my chin, my back straight as an arrow. This mark stands for Isabel. The clock struck 11 and made me jump. I had much to do in little time. The fastest way off the island was a boat, much as the thought made me tremble. I searched through the sea of papers on the table until I found a chart of the tides. I ran my finger down the columns. Huzzah! The tide would not turn against me for a few hours. I lacked only a pass. Colonel Hawkins had been in the habit of keeping them locked in the chest in the library, but he had become sloppy and overworked since the rebel victories. I opened the drawers of the secretary table and looked through large boxes of official papers. There, I grabbed the paper and dashed to a small side table for a quill and bottle of ink. I crowded the candles in close together to give me enough light, took a deep breath to steady my hand, and dipped the quill. I took a second breath and bent over to fill in the empty bits of the pass. New York, 1777. I wrote in 18th January in the blank space. It had been some time since I wrote out letters. The J wobbled and the R appeared to be an N. I set down the quill, wiped my hands on my skirt, and picked it up again. This is to certify, to whomsoever it may concern, that the bearer hereof, that was where I had to write my name. I scratched out Isabel and stopped. I was not a Lockton nor a Finch. Isabel, Rhode Island, that would not do. Isabel Cuff after Papa, or Isabel Dinah after Mama. I closed my eyes and thought of home, the smell of fresh cut hay and the taste of raspberries. Robins chasing bugs in the bean patch, setting worms to work at the base of the corn plants, showing Ruth what was weed and what was flour. I opened my eyes, dipping the quill, and wrote out my true name, Isabel Gardner. Being a free Negro, has the commandment's permission to pass from this garrison to whatever place she may think proper. It was signed with lots of fancy titles that belonged to the colonel and the commandment and the king himself. I wished that there would have been space for Her Majesty Queen Charlotte of Great Britain to sign it too. She and me shared a birthday now, for I was reborn as Isabel Gardner, and that paper proved it. Exciting. We'll have to find out what she's going to do next and if she's successful. Be ready to discuss. Thanks for listening.